When I was in 7th grade, I read The Lord of the Rings for the first time, and it made a huge impact on my heart, my soul, my mind as a 12, 13-year-old boy. There's a scene that comes in the Fellowship of the Ring when the Fellowship is moving through the mines of Moria, and they're being chased by this monstrous demon dragon creature called the Balrog, and they come to this bridge called the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, and the Fellowship starts making their way across the bridge, and Gandalf, who's the wizard who is leading them through this, he stops and he turns and he faces down the Balrog, who wants to cross on this bridge, and he looks at this demon and he says, "Go back to the shadow." And with might and force and power, he lifts up his staff and slams it down on the bridge, and it's such a beautiful scene, and Peter Jackson did it so perfectly in the movies, but he screams, "You shall not pass," right? And the Balrog eventually falls down into the great abyss. That scene often comes to mind for me around this time of year when I think about the anniversary of Pope St. Paul VI's encyclical, Humanae Vitae, which was released on July 25th, 1968, which means this year is the 55th anniversary of Pope Paul VI's landmark bombshell encyclical. Here it is. It's a tiny thing, very thin, could take you about 15 minutes to read, maybe cover to cover. And yet this little encyclical has sent shockwaves through the church, through history, through culture. What is it about this encyclical? Well, in Humanae Vitae, Pope Paul VI, he upheld the church's traditional teaching, the teaching that has come from antiquity through centuries, that each and every act of marital intercourse needs to be both open to life and unitive. It basically said that, no, we cannot accept contraceptives in any form. Pope Paul VI looked at the enemy, who is the enemy of our human nature, and he said to him, "You shall not pass. I will not let you into this place." He was a guardian, he was a protector, and he protected the heart of the church, the bride, from something that was really destructive. You know, the church speaks so clearly and so definitively on the issues of marriage and sex and family and the issue of contraception, not because we're obsessed with rules, but because we love people. The church loves people. The church believes in lifelong monogamous marriage. The church is a hopeless romantic that believes that two people can fall in love and stay in love. The church believes in the goodness of family life, that is the good for which every other thing is a means to an end, that to enjoy the simple pleasures, the simple holiness of family life. The church says that is a good that we want everyone to be able to experience. The church believes that you, as an individual, you ought to experience this life as much as possible free from avoidable sorrows and filled to the brim with as much joy and blessing as possible. The church believes in families and the rights of parents to be the primary educators and formators of their kids. The church believes that every child has a right, wherever possible, to have a relationship with his or her own parents, their own biological mother and father, and to have those people, their mom and dad, answer the question, like, who am I? Like, granted, there are many situations where that's not possible, and we have these other institutions like adoption that fills in those gaps. Right? Adoption is a child-centered institution that's trying to give a child the mom and dad that he or she deserves, to give them the experience of being part of a family, the incredible gift of having a mom, of having a dad. Right? The church desires for you to have a heart that is free from guilt and shame and regret. The church wants that for her sons and daughters, right? The church desires for you, God willing, to maybe come to your wedding day or the day of your ordination or the day of your consecration or first vows. The church desires for you to come to that pivotal day with a heart that's as free as possible, free from guilt, free from shame, free from remorse. The church wants you to be able to come to that day with just innocence and joy in your heart. And all of that is why the church speaks so strongly about marriage and the true meaning of sexuality. And why Pope Paul VI released this little encyclical on contraception, because the church believes that there's nothing that militates against the human good more than this idea that we can disrupt what God has united. Like, it was only just a few decades ago where everybody understood that marriage and sex and babies go together, and in that order. If you weren't married, you didn't do the thing that married people do. Namely, you didn't have sexual relationships with anybody. Why? Very simply because sex can and often does lead to babies, right? And babies need moms and dads. Babies need moms and dads who are committed to each other for the long haul to raise them, because raising kids is hard. It's hard. Like, I don't know if you remembered learning this, but I remember learning this in elementary school or hearing this growing up, that childish nursery rhyme, right? First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the baby and the baby carriage. What we didn't know when we were learning that when we were children was that that's good theology. That's good moral theology. That's good philosophy. That's clear. That's clear. What I think that the world has lost is an understanding that those things are meant to go together in that order: marriage, sex, and babies. Because here's the logic. Here's the logic that's behind the church's teaching on all these things. There are men and women in this world. I know that that's already immediately controversial, but there are men and women in this world, and we are biologically complementary to each other, right? And men and women, they have this natural magnetism. Men and women tend to fall in love, is what I'm saying. That's what happens when you grow up, right? Men and women tend to fall in love. And when they're in love, they tend to want to show and express their love to each other. They want to give themselves to each other, right? And the highest form of doing that is not holding hands, right? That's maybe a step along the way, but when men and women are in love, they don't merely want to hold hands, they don't merely want to kiss, they don't merely want to hug. That at the uppermost, love says, I want to give all that I am to you. And the only way that we can do that in an embodied way is through sexual intimacy, through sexual intercourse. That's what it is. That's what it says, is I give the entire gift of myself to you, holding nothing back, right? And the thing about sex that the world has forgotten is that sex makes babies. Again, it's controversial, but it's true. That's what it does. Sex makes babies. It often leads to life. And babies, they need moms and dads to raise them. We don't come into the world like little baby snakes or sharks. Like, we're not hatched and we're not just off and running. No, we require high levels of investment and involvement from mom and dad to raise us into maturity, right? Sex makes babies. That's what it does. So if the people who are going to be engaged in that activity are going to be responsible, then they should have already made the vows of committing to each other. This is why every culture that's left us a written record of its existence has channeled the relationships of adult men and women into a stable, vowed relationship called marriage, right? Marriage is the commitment of husband and wife to each other so that they are prepared to be mother and father to any children that their union produces, right? So contraception, it's been with us since the dawn of time. Men and women have been trying to split apart what God has joined, trying to split apart the unitive from the procreative. I mean, there's hieroglyphics in ancient Egypt showing crude and pretty disgusting ways of trying to attempt this. But it really wasn't until the development of rubber in the 1800s and really with the advent of the birth control pill in the 1960s did we have a somewhat reliable means of thwarting the procreative potential of sexual intimacy. And what contraception has done is it's created a world where people think it's possible to have casual sex. They think it's possible for sex to be recreative instead of procreative. And it's been immensely destructive for women, right? Pope Paul VI, he predicted all of these things in this little encyclical. He said it would lead to increased rates of abortion, which it has. It would lead to increased rates of marital infidelity, which it has. He said it would lead to this idea of man having total autonomy over our humanity, this sort of mastering of our own nature and transcending our own humanity and the limitations given therein, and it has. He said it would lead to governments, the temptation of governments and those in power and authority to exert their authority precisely in this issue. It has. Right? When this came out in 1968, people were still talking about overpopulation. We don't have a problem of overpopulation. We have a problem of intense underpopulation. Pope Paul VI was immensely prophetic. This encyclical was immensely prophetic. He saw something. He saw something. The church was onto something. You know, the church is the guardian of our humanity. The church is a mother. And whatever the church says no to, she says with the tone of a mother. She's saying, no, it's not because it's against the rules, it's because that's not good for you. Every mother knows that tone of voice. No, you can't stick the fork into the outlet. That's not good for you. I know you want to. No, you can't drink that. That's called antifreeze. I know it looks like Gatorade, but you can't do that. That's not good for you. No, you can't play that close to traffic. It's not good for you. Whatever the church says no to, she's protecting an even greater yes. She's protecting our ability to live lives of abundance. That's why the church speaks so intensely and clearly on the issues of marriage and sexuality and contraception. So I want to invite you, if you've never read this encyclical, I want to challenge you to read it. It'll take you maybe a half hour. It's well worth the time. So we asked Pope Paul VI, the guardian of the church's deposit of faith, Gandalf in the ranks of the communion of saints, who said, "You shall not pass to the enemy." We asked for his intercession as we mark the 55th anniversary of the release of Humanae Vitae. God bless you.